Oh, that's cool. Georgia has introduced HB 1128 called the Women's Bill of Rights. Two guesses as to what this one refers to. It is not about women's rights. Most alarmingly, it ends all legal recognition of trans people and removes sexual orientation and gender identity from qualifying as a hate crime. Nice, but it keeps sex, you see. So, it's the pro-hate crime bill, it seems. The bill would prevent people from updating their legal gender markers on driver's licenses, birth certificates, medical documents, and so much more. It would ban trans people from bathrooms and more. Where's the full text? Every state has their own goddamn... Here we go. So the strike-throughs then, presumably, are changes. Said title is further amended by revising paragraphs 4 through 6 of subsection D of Code Section 131 relating to the construction of statutes generally as follows. Gender, the masculine gender includes the feminine and the neuter. Joint authority number. Oh, I see. They're just removing this provision. Like this, they're removing recognition of gender as like a legal construct and having only sex. Gender usage changed to sexual terminology. Removing gender, sexual orientation and gender from the hate crime provisions. Forms for such reports shall be designated and provided by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The report shall include names of the parties, relationship of the parties, and it used to be sex and gender of the parties, but now it'll just be sex of the parties, race of the parties, religion of the parties. Yeah, the purpose of this, not the consequence of, but the deliberate purpose of this, is to make it easier to commit crimes against trans people by not recording that information. It would essentially make violence against trans people invisible because there would no longer be records on that information legally. It would be like an effort to sweep it under the rug. They're not making it legal to attack trans people, but it could no longer be a hate crime, even if it was determined to be like because they were trans. They wouldn't even like record it or look into it. Keep in mind, the only reason this would be done is if they were pro-hate crimes being done against trans people. That's it. That's literally it. There's no wraparound, here's some other thing, and this is a consequence of it or whatever. That's the explicit only reason to do this. And gay people. Sorry, I shouldn't say just trans people, and gay people. Because sexual orientation is also removed from the list of things that'll be recorded. So now if a bunch of like trans or gay people get beaten to death, oh sure, it's still murder, and the people who commit those crimes, will be tried, we hope. But it won't be recorded, as like a hate crime. That information won't be processed. Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to education is amended by replacing genders with sexes. Gender discrimination, authorize separate gender teams, of course. Said title is further amended by replacing the term gender with sexual, wherever the former appears in Code Section 22316, regarding high school athletics, really going after the two trans people in the state. Won't be able to change driver's license or other certificates. The General Assembly finds that just as gender separated, twinly separated one sex among relatives, should be allowed to, yeah. Do you think this will pass? I'm not sure. I don't know much about the Georgia legislature. How does this differ from gender abolition? Benjamin, with respect, that's an incredibly stupid question to ask. Are you kidding me? A series of sweeping bill changes specifically targeted to reduce the rights of trans people and make it easier to commit crimes against them without it being registered as a hate crime. What on earth does this have to do with gender abolition? I mean, how do you legally remove gender without creating that? I mean, you don't legally remove gender abolition is a long-term cultural project. It's not like a bill comes out that no longer recognizes it. Like, I think racial abolitionism is also a good thing, but that doesn't mean you would like, here's a bill, like, we no longer look at race and issues or whatever. That's it. Yeah, that really seems to be it. This is just like an amendment to pre-existing legislation that just makes it easier to commit hate crimes against gay and trans people and reduces the rights of trans people. That's it. That's the whole damn thing. Sponsored by Jody, Lisa, Kimberly, Penny, Bethany, and Alan. Real 10 guesses on the saltine, the backgrounds of these individuals. Kimberly, Penny, Christ. In Georgia, too. You know these motherfuckers aren't from Atlanta. Well, we'll see if it passes. This would be extraordinarily bad if it does pass. It is essentially like a pro-hate crime bill. I don't think that's an exaggeration or hyperbole. The only reason you'd make those changes would be to do that. So many states trying that exact same shit. Yeah, to an extent, but like it's so overt. It's so It's just so straightforward, you know? Like, this is what I mean when I say, like, people argue against the genocidal thing. But, like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, there's just no reason to do this unless you... It's just really blatant. I mean, it's not surprising. It's a logical extension of the behavior they've engaged in the past. It's just always surprising to see euphemisms dropped in favor of very straightforwardly pro-murder behavior. Yes, the killers of Brianna Ghey did get sentenced, and that is good. But that's also across the pond, you know. Of course they were going to get sentenced, right? Like, there was no getting out of that. They were both caught essentially dead to rights with a bunch of text messages sent between each other, and they were like, yeah, let's kill people. Like, I wasn't surprised that they got sentenced. And unsurprisingly, they look like weirdo, like, considering the fact that their text messages back and forth read like they were both creepypasta enthusiasts who thought they were going to be the next Slender Man. They look exactly the way you think they would look. They just look like losers, you know? Not, pardon me for relying once more upon phrenology, but the two seething incels lashing out at the chat, well, Stacy, I guess, don't hate me, you know, for being moisturized and in the moment, you know? Brianna Ghey was moisturized in her element. She'll be loved forever. And, you know, these two sweaty losers will die in prison. So, yeah, I mean, that's cool. Isn't it just 20 years? 20 years is a very long time. That's more than their entire lives up to this point. I think it has the possibility of being extended as well. I'm not as familiar with their legal system. The trans mafia will bring them to a swift end in prison. Were they charged with a hate crime? They weren't, because the prosecution didn't want to have to argue the specifics. What they did was undeniably a hate crime, and everyone agrees on it, but they didn't bring that charge because it would have complicated the legal process and involved them having to make subjective arguments on whether or not their statements qualified as a hate crime, rather than focus on the extremely upfront and obvious "they murdered her" argument, which they could prove empirically. Sometimes crimes that a person definitely does get overlooked in the prosecution because it's much easier to make the case to quickly bring them to, you know, keep in mind, they got sent to prison very quickly. The crime only happened a few months ago. Their sentence, like that, this was like this. For any kind of, you know, criminal justice outcome, this is quite quick. So also, life being 20 years usually doesn't mean you're free after 20 years. After 20 years, your case usually gets reviewed to see if you're eligible for release. And if they continue to be crazy, maybe it won't. The judge agreed the boy at least was motivated by transphobia. Yeah. Like, nobody here disagrees, except for J.K. Rowling, I guess, and her, you know, her broader group. Vosh feels like every country that doesn't want me dead right now will want me dead in 5 years. Legit starting to feel desperate. People are more accepting of trans people now than they ever have been. What you're dealing with right now is a loud countercultural movement. You know, the backlash, so to speak. Watch Tengen Toppan Gurren Lagann. Lift your spirits up, okay? Let your will be the spiral, all right?